everyone, and welcome back to my booktube channel, Lisa in Bookland, and welcome to my October 2023 reading wrap up. It's a little bit better than last month. Ordinarily in October it would be filled with Victober reading. I did manage to read 2 reads from Victober, but not nearly so much as I would have liked, and I still am so behind on my Victorian literature reading project, so I think they're mostly going to carry into next year, but that's fine. I was still quite busy, but yeah, I was happy to get some more reading done and to get back to booktube. So in total I read 7 things. I think definitely 3 things could be classed as comfort reading. So the earliest book that I read was actually, it was a leftover read from Shakespeare, and I actually just finished it recently, which is just graceful. But I finally got a paper copy, and that is Richard III, which is one of the Shakespeare read-alongs, and yeah, I just hadn't read the last act, but I bought this wonderful Dover Giant Thrift Edition second hand that has 4 history plays in it, and I'm really delighted with this edition because I was looking at editions of Shakespeare in the shop and they all were really big and had loads of notes, and I just knew I wasn't going to read the notes, like I just knew it, so I felt like a waste to buy them big editions when space is such a big limitation. Each play here just has like a page or 2 introduction, like basically explaining what's going on in the history at this stage, and like limited footnotes just so things that you mightn't understand, which I absolutely thought was perfect, so can't recommend this edition enough. I know that they do bind-ups of the other Shakespeare plays as well, so I'll probably keep an eye out for those. But anyways, in terms of how I found Richard III, it was the first history that I'd read and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was brilliant. Like, to be honest, maybe the histories suit me better than the other Shakespeares just because I'm interested in history, but also I suppose when I was in London I saw Macbeth on stage and I absolutely thought it was wonderful, so maybe it was just the experience of seeing Shakespeare live kind of made me open my eyes to how good a plays they are, and not just something to be studied. Like, I'd seen one Shakespeare live before ages ago, 11 years at this stage. I saw Hamlet, but yeah, like this this play was filled with such familiar lines. Opens with "This is the winter of our discontent," so there is satisfaction in knowing where those lines come from. I did finish this after watching the adaptation The Hollow Crown, with Benedict Cumberbatch, is that how you pronounce his name, as Richard III, and yeah, I just thought and that was an amazing adaptation, like shorter, but it got me ready for reading the actual play. What was really stuck out for me about this play it was the end. Like, the end is the Battle of Bosworth, and it's like, I don't know, 3 pages long in this whereas it's much longer seen in the adaptation. I suppose there just isn't an awful lot of, shockingly, monologues and talking during battles, so yeah, that was an interesting one. But yeah, really enjoyed this, and I definitely will be reading the rest of these plays. I have already watched Henry IV Part 1 in the Hollow Crown box set that I have. I'd love to read that play because I really enjoyed it, but yeah, no, I won't say I'm converted yet, but my eyes have been opened a little. These are the 2 new books that I did buy. The other one was this one, Sharpe's Command by Bernard Cornwell. I actually like that one I just talked about, I bought online, and this one my dearest dad went into Eason's and bought it for me. I wouldn't be a frequent book buyer, so that entertained me, but it's a new release. It was released just earlier in October. I read it like 2 days later over the course of like a Saturday, and it was just so wonderful. It was just like getting a big hug. Like, this is the 23rd Sharpe novel, but like he doesn't necessarily release them chronologically, so this is set after Sharpe's enemy in 1812. The British are trying to prevent the French being able to cross this river, or like fix this bridge, because then 2 parts of the French army will be able to join up in Spain, and they're trying to avoid that, and it has all the usual Sharpe complications. I will say that this felt like a complete fan service. Like, this is the best part of the Sharpe novels. So many great characters that come back, some of which are sadly died by the time of like Sharpe's Waterloo or the later Sharpe that came out. One in particular I was so happy to see, but like I love them so much that I didn't mind at all. Yeah, it just was pure and utter comfort reading. Teresa was in it, which like that's always the issue I have with Sharpe. Maybe it's always like womanizing, and the women in it don't tend to be particularly interesting sometimes, but Teresa is, so I was happy that she was there. And yeah, it was just absolutely amazing from start to the inevitable end. There would be such a great drinking game to be had with the Sharpe books if you had the right list. One of the most entertaining parts of Sharpe are always like his subordinate officers, and one of them is called here, like this is just an example of the Sharpe humour throughout the book. There's Lieutenant Love, and he's called Cupid throughout the book, like kind of stupid jokes like that, but I just love them. So I read one non-fiction book this month, and that is this book that I also carried over from September, Barrows Boys, the original Extreme Adventures, by Fergus Fleming. This is a non-fiction that's covering this guy called John Barrow. So John Barrow was the second secretary in the British Admiralty for much of the 19th century, and he, I suppose, was the influence behind a lot of these expeditions to the Arctic and to Antarctica and also to Africa. So yeah, I'd read of a lot of these expeditions before, at least the Arctic and Antarctic ones, but not from this kind of lens. So it was really interesting to hear of the power he had, and also when there was like one person that was influencing a lot of these, like he was often very biased and he definitely had favourites even if he wasn't the best people for the job. So it was really interesting to read through that. And but I also had never read anything about like African exploration. You'd often come across these offhand mentions like the sources of the Nile and things, but I'd never read anything about it, so those were really fascinating as well. Just the different kind of characters that went on them. Like there was one character, George Lyon. I'd love to read a full biography about him because he was a character to say the least. He definitely wholeheartedly took on all the cultures of the natives and the places that he went and threw himself into everything, which was a lot more successful than a lot of other explorers of the time. There was also a bit about like overland travel to the Arctic, say, like that famous John Franklin expedition, not the Northwest Passage one, but when he went up overland and ended up eating his own boots. Like I'd heard that reference, but I'd never actually read even like a brief account of the expedition. And that's what I loved about these. I suppose they were short and kind of digestible bits about all of them, and yeah, just a brilliant book if you are interested in exploration, I think. So I did actually manage to read 2 reads for Victober, which, as I said, not as many as I would have liked, but at least I got to read something. And I'm particularly happy that I got to reread Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. It was a book that I really loved when I was a child and read many times, but hadn't read for many years. Read like a few like Victorian animal books now, and this is definitely my favourite. It's told through the voice of Black Beauty the horse, and it actually says at the front it's translated from the original equine, which I think was funny. And yeah, it just goes through Black Beauty's life and all the different owners he's had and how they treated him. There are a lot of sad moments, but it's nowhere near as like violent to say like Bob of the Battle that I'd read, or like Call of the Wild. I think it's more in line with like a children's book today, even though still quite sadder than a children's book today would be, I think. But yeah, Black Beauty just has such a lovely personality, always willing to do his best, and yeah, just a really noble horse, I guess you would say. So really enjoyed reading this book again. Some bits of this book had stuck in my mind so much. Like I don't even think I've seen the film above once, but like I will always remember Joe the cabbie and like him being cold that night and the fire, and yeah, just some bits really stuck out to you. So no, I really enjoyed Black Beauty. Really nice book. The second thing I read for Victober then was actually A Drama in Muslin by George Moore. I was really delighted to read something by George Moore because he was from not too far away from me in County Mayo, that we won't hold against him. Oh, I should have said Black Beauty was published in 1877 and A Drama in Muslin was published in 1886. So A Drama in Muslin is an absolutely wonderful Irish Victorian classic about these sisters. At the start of the book they're at boarding school. It's not specified where it is, but it's definitely abroad, and they're just finishing up. It's a very Catholic school. The priest is coming to examine their final performance and they're getting ready for that. Quite shortly into the book they return home to their house in I think it's Galway they live in, yeah, I'm pretty sure. The 2 sisters, so their sisters are called Alice and Olive. Alice is very sensible, she's interested in writing and she does write as well. She's not that interested in marriage, and Olive is very interested in marriage. She does have suitors. Does this remind you of anything? If you said Sense and Sensibility, you would be correct. They reminded me very much of Sense and Sensibility, and even like the tone I think was kind of Jane Austen-esque. But do you know what was funniest? Do you know what Alice and Olive's second name is? Barton. I wonder is that a reference to Barton Cottage? I'm probably overthinking it, but yeah, I just they really reminded me of Marianne and Eleanor. So yeah, it's about when they return home, what they're going to do with their lives. There's a lot of talk about like the marriage market, and it's called that multiple times throughout the book. It is a very Irish novel. When they're coming out for the season, they are not going to London, they're going to Dublin, whereas the same kind of idea of thing would happen in Dublin Castle, and you'll be presented to the Lord Lieutenant. It was the first time I'd read a book about the season in Dublin Castle, so that was interesting, about kind of the crush of it, and like the Anglo-Irish gentry maybe mightn't have been as wealthy, at least a lot of them, as like their English counterparts, and just the kind of tension of like trying to get ready for the season, but if you have an unsuccessful season and you've spent all your money on dresses and things, like how much of a waste that is, and like how much pressure there is to try and be successful. I suppose kind of coming from that, like when they're all going to Dublin Castle, like all of the poor of Dublin I suppose are looking at them, and they feel kind of awkward in their carriages and their finery, I suppose, when the poorer class are looking at them, and that kind of tension is there throughout the novel, which I absolutely loved. Like a big focus of this novel, as well as like Olive and Alice's kind of trials and travails and tribulations with their various suitors, I suppose, is the Land League and the troubles of like Irish tenants. So the Land League was all about trying to get like rights for tenants in Ireland, and if they didn't, there was a lot of kind of attacks on livestock and threats and violence to agents especially, but also the landlords themselves, and there was a lot of nerves about that, I suppose, when they're talking at dinners between different families and things that came up. But there was an absolute, and then they were all kind of relieved to go to Dublin for the season to escape all that. There was an absolutely brilliantly written scene, and this is kind of another thing that nearly reminded me of Jane Austen, how like witty it was. So like Mrs. Barton is inside in the house negotiating with this suitor that Olive has about the marriage, and then outside her husband Mr. Barton is negotiating with the tenants about their rent, and I just thought it was such a brilliant scene. I really enjoyed that. It was just such an unexpected novel in many ways. The Irish setting will still be a novelty to me, I suppose, when you read so much novels set in England, but also just the themes. Like I suppose it is a bit later Victorian, but there were some like really shocking themes here that like shocked me as a modern reader when you're not expecting them. Like Alice is like basically an atheist and declares that. There's a lot about like feminism. As I said, she does write and wants to make money from that. There's also like a lesbian, or a very heavily implied lesbian relationship in this, with an absolutely brilliant ending. Oh my god. It wasn't requited or anything at the end. We can't go that far. Sex outside marriage is also a theme, so just like, yeah, it was just so much in this book, and I'd really highly recommend it if you're looking for some different Victorian literature. So yes, so as part of Victober, I did intend to vlog Victober, but I didn't end up reading enough literature to be able to do that, but I did actually visit Mor Hall. As I said, it's not too far away from me, so I'll overlay some footage of that here. So George Moore would have been born here and lived here in his youth, though he actually didn't spend much time here in his adulthood. Even though he was the older son, he left it in the management of his brother Morris. It was very sadly burned in 1923 by the anti-treaty or IRA. They don't really know why, but they think it was probably because out of fears it should be used as a base by the Irish National Army. It is kind of sad because the Moors, as is very clear from a drama in Muslin, they were actually very nationalist family, very well liked, and they're very famous to this day as not having any of their tenants die during the famine. Morris Moore actually was involved in the struggle for independence himself, so yeah, that's why it's a pity. It's a pity that the house in particular was burned. But it was really nice to see the house, and really beautiful grounds if you're ever nearby. Very nice woods around and things to walk. So the final classic I read, not Victorian, a little bit later, was The Making of a Marchioness. This is unashamedly just a comfort read, and I listened to an audiobook. It wasn't even that long ago since I first listened to it. It's by Frances Hodgson, Burnett, and it's about a poor kind-hearted lady's companion called Emily, who marries this older marquis, and yeah, like I absolutely loved the first half of the novel. Like Emily is such a lovely character, and then the second half it does very much tip into like melodrama, which is fine, but like I always find the ending is like unintentionally hilarious just because it is so melodramatic. But yeah, it was just what I needed at the time. I really enjoyed it. I think I nearly enjoyed it more the second time than the first time, if you can believe it. And finally, another reread, contemporary, again, another comfort read, The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. This is probably the 6th or 7th time that I've read this book, and I have never read any of the rest of the series. I just always return to The Kiss Quotient. I've no excuse. I just absolutely adore this romance book. It is, the main character Stella has autism and she's an econometrician. She struggles in relationships. Her mother is dying for her to start going out with somebody, so she hires this male escort to teach her how to be in a relationship. So yeah, I think this is kind of in my head as well, because Pretty Woman the musical is coming to Ireland next year and I'm going to see it, and I was just so excited. I was just thinking about Pretty Woman, I suppose, and then I thought about this book. So yeah, it's just so heartwarming. There are a good few steamy scenes in it, but I just love Stella as a character. I just absolutely adore it. So yes, on the whole, not a terrible month. I did get through a good few books, even if a good few of them were hangovers from September. But yeah, hopefully I'll be able to read more Victorian literature, even if it's outside the confines of October. I never did get to The Small House at Allington or the group read, so yeah. Victober is a state of mind, right, not a month. But yes, yeah, so I am still in the middle of a lot of other books as well. As I mentioned before, I am going away at the end of November, so I'm kind of hoping that I will have finished all the books that at least most of the shorter books that I'm in the middle of by then, so I can have clear decks for my holiday. So yes, very excited for that. But yes, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday for my next video.